My 13-year-old niece destroyed her dying brother's final wish, and I am still shaking. The sound of 10,000 Lego pieces hitting the hardwood floor will haunt me until the day I die. I was carrying a tray of Tommy's medication upstairs when I heard it, that distinctive cascade of plastic hitting wood, like rain made of childhood dreams. My blood went cold because I knew exactly what that sound meant. I knew what Sarah had done before I even reached the doorway of Tommy's room. The castle was gone. 3 weeks of work. 3 weeks of my 8-year-old nephew's remaining strength, poured into every turret, every carefully placed brick, every tiny window that he positioned with shaking hands. The medieval masterpiece that had consumed his final burst of energy now lay scattered across the floor like confetti at the world's cruelest celebration. Tommy sat frozen in his hospital bed, portable oxygen tank humming beside him, staring at the destruction with those 2 large eyes that cancer had given him. His bald head caught the afternoon light streaming through his bedroom window, and I watched a single tear roll down his hollow cheek. Sarah stood in the center of the wreckage, arms crossed, defiant. 13 years old and radiating the kind of cold satisfaction that made my stomach turn. Her perfectly healthy cheeks were flushed with anger, her blonde hair still in the neat ponytail my sister had braided that morning before rushing off to another one of Sarah's soccer tournaments. It was taking up too much space, she said, not even bothering to look ashamed. And everyone keeps talking about it like it's so special. It's just stupid Legos. The tray trembled in my hands. Tommy's 2:30 p.m. doses of morphine and anti-nausea medication clinked together in their little plastic cups. He needed these pills. He needed them every 4 hours, precisely, or the pain would claw its way back into his small, failing body. But right now, I couldn't move. Sarah. My voice came out barely above a whisper. What did you do? She shrugged. Actually shrugged. I told you. It was in my way. I wanted to use the Xbox, and all his stupid castle stuff was blocking the TV. The TV that we'd moved into Tommy's room 2 weeks ago when he became too weak to walk downstairs. The Xbox that Sarah had demanded be relocated here so she could spend time with Tommy, though she'd spent more time complaining about his game choices than actually playing with him. Tommy finally spoke, his voice paper thin. Aunt Lisa, it's okay. I can build another one. But we all knew he couldn't. Dr. Martinez had been clear during yesterday's family meeting. Days, maybe a week. Tommy's body was shutting down, and even sitting up for 20 minutes to place Lego bricks had become an exhausting ordeal. This castle, his Greystone Keep, he'd called it, complete with a working drawbridge and a hidden treasure chamber, had been everything to him. His final project. His masterpiece. The one thing he'd wanted to complete before. I spent my allowance on the expansion set, Tommy whispered, still staring at the ruins. The dragon set. I wanted to add a dragon. You can still add it, Sarah said dismissively, already heading toward the Xbox controller. Just rebuild it. It's not that hard. That's when something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a taut wire suddenly released, vibrating with deadly precision. I set the medication tray down very carefully on Tommy's nightstand and looked at my niece. Really looked at her. Memorizing her face in this moment, cataloging every detail of her casual cruelty. Sarah had no idea what she'd just unleashed. Sarah, go to your room. My voice was steady now, eerily calm. Right now. But I want to. Go. Something in my tone must have finally penetrated her teenage self-absorption because she actually took a step back. For the first time since I'd known her, Sarah looked uncertain. You can't tell me what to do. You're not my mom. Your mom isn't here. I took a step closer to her, careful not to disturb the scattered Lego pieces. She's at your soccer tournament. The one that was apparently more important than spending Saturday afternoon with her dying son. Sarah's mouth fell open. We didn't talk like that in this family. We didn't acknowledge the ugly truths out loud. My sister Linda had spent the last 3 months maintaining the fiction that everything was normal, that Tommy was just a little sick, that Sarah's needs were just as important as her brother's. I'm telling Mom you were mean to me, Sarah said, but her voice wavered. Go ahead. Tell her. Tell her exactly what happened here today. I knelt down and picked up a piece of Tommy's castle, a gray brick with a small tower attachment. It had been part of the main gatehouse. Tell her how you destroyed your dying brother's last wish because you wanted to play video games. Stop saying that. Sarah's face was turning red now. Stop saying he's dying. Mom says he's going to get better. Tommy spoke up from his bed, and his voice was stronger than it had been in days. Sarah, I am dying. We all know it. Even you know it. The words hung in the air like smoke. This was the first time Tommy had said it out loud, at least in front of his sister. Dr. Martinez had explained the situation to Linda and me 6 weeks ago, after the 3rd round of chemotherapy failed. The tumors weren't responding. They were spreading. An 8-year-old's body could only fight for so long. Linda had insisted we not tell the children directly. Let them be kids, she'd said. Let them have hope. But Tommy was smarter than that. He'd figured it out during the transition to palliative care, when the daily blood draw stopped and the focus shifted to comfort measures. He'd asked me directly last Tuesday while Linda was at parent-teacher conferences for Sarah's honor roll ceremony. Am I going to die, Aunt Lisa? And I'd broken Linda's rule. I told him the truth. Sarah stood there now, staring at her brother, and for a moment I thought I saw something crack in her facade. A flicker of the little girl who used to build blanket forts with Tommy, who used to share her Halloween candy with him without being asked. Then the moment passed. Fine, she said. But I still don't see why everyone has to act like his stupid castle was so special. It wasn't even that good. The walls weren't even straight. I felt my hands clench into fists. Those walls had been crooked because Tommy's medication made him shake. They'd been rebuilt 6 times because his fine motor skills were deteriorating. Every imperfect angle represented hours of struggle, of a little boy refusing to give up on his dream even as his body betrayed him. Get out, I said quietly. Get out of this room right now, before I do something your mother will never forgive me for. Sarah finally left, slamming the door behind her. I turned back to Tommy, who was crying silently into his pillow. That's when I made my decision. Sarah was going to learn exactly how special that castle was. And she was going to learn it the hard way. I spent the next hour on my hands and knees, carefully collecting every single piece of Tommy's destroyed castle. Each brick went into a separate Ziploc bag, sorted by color and size, just like Tommy had organized them in his special Lego storage system. He watched me from his bed, occasionally directing me toward pieces I'd missed. The gray corner piece by the window, Aunt Lisa. That was part of the wizard's tower. Got it, sweetheart. And there's a tiny green one under the dresser. That was special, it was the only lime green in the whole set. My knees ached against the hardwood, but I didn't stop. Tommy needed to see that his work mattered, that someone understood the value of what he created. More importantly, I needed evidence. Photos wouldn't be enough for what I had planned. At 4:15 p.m., Linda returned from Sarah's soccer tournament, her voice carrying up the stairs before her feet did. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, get down here right now. Mrs. Chen from next door just told me the most ridiculous story about you destroying Tommy's Lego set. Please tell me she's confused. I heard Sarah's bedroom door open. Mom, it was an accident. I just bumped into his table and... Sarah, don't lie to me. Mrs. Chen said she heard you yelling about it being in your way. I smiled grimly as I sealed the last bag of Lego pieces. Mrs. Chen had always been observant, but I hadn't realized she'd been listening. Sarah's web of lies was already unraveling. Tommy stirred on his bed. Aunt Lisa? Are you going to tell Mom what really happened? I don't need to tell her, buddy. She's about to find out. Linda's footsteps thundered up the stairs. She burst through Tommy's door, took one look at me kneeling surrounded by labeled bags of Lego pieces, and her face went white. Oh my God. Tommy, honey, I'm so sorry. Sarah said it was an accident. It wasn't an accident, Linda. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting. Your daughter looked her dying brother in the eye and told him his castle was stupid and not that good before she destroyed it. Then she tried to play Xbox while he cried. Linda sank into the chair beside Tommy's bed. Sarah wouldn't, she's been under so much stress with Tommy being sick, and her grades, and soccer playoffs. Stop. Tommy's voice cut through his mother's excuses with startling clarity. Mom, just stop. Sarah knew exactly what she was doing. She's been mean to me for weeks, and you never see it because you're always at her games or her school stuff. The accusation hit Linda like a physical blow. I watched my sister's face crumble as the weight of Tommy's words sank in. She'd been so focused on maintaining Sarah's normal life that she'd missed her daughter's growing resentment and cruelty. Tommy, that's not. I'm trying to balance everything. You know how much I love you. I know you love me, Mom. But you love her more. His voice was matter of fact, without anger. It's okay. I understand. She's going to be here after I'm gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda covered her face with her hands, and I could see her shoulders shaking. I need to see the damage, she whispered finally. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken before cleaning up. The castles remained scattered like a crime scene. Tommy's expression of devastation captured in heartbreaking detail. Sarah standing triumphant in the background of one shot, arms still crossed in defiance. Linda stared at the images for a long moment. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but determined. What do you think we should do? That's when I knew she was finally ready to hear my plan. We're going to make sure Sarah understands exactly what she destroyed, I said, settling into the chair across from Linda. And we're going to make sure she never forgets it. Tommy had drifted off to sleep, exhausted from the afternoon's trauma. His breathing was shallow but steady, the oxygen concentrator maintaining its rhythmic hum. Linda reached over and smoothed his blanket, her movements gentle and guilty. What do you have in mind? She asked quietly. I pulled out a small notebook where I'd been tracking Tommy's medications and appointments. Over the past hour, while collecting Lego pieces, I'd started a different kind of list on the back pages. First, we're going to rebuild the castle. Together. All three of us. I showed her the carefully organized bags of pieces. Tommy can direct us from his bed. Every brick he remembers, every detail he wanted to include. It's going to take time we don't have, but we're going to do it. Linda nodded slowly. Okay. Yes. But Sarah is going to watch. She's going to sit in that corner chair for every single minute we spend rebuilding what she destroyed. No phone, no books, no distractions. She's going to see exactly how much work went into Tommy's castle. Lisa, that could take days. She has school, and soccer practice, and... No. My voice was firm. She doesn't. Not anymore. I already called Coach Patterson and told him Sarah won't be at practice this week due to a family emergency. And I drafted an email to her teachers requesting her assignments so she can work from home. Linda's eyes widened. You can't just make those decisions without. Someone had to. You were at a soccer tournament while your son was having his final wish destroyed. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't take them back. Sarah's activities can wait. Tommy can't wait. The truth of it settled between us like a stone. Linda closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something had shifted. What else? We're going to document everything. Photos of the rebuilding process. Video of Tommy explaining each section of his castle, every creative choice he made. His voice describing the dragon lair he wanted to add, the secret passages he'd planned. I flipped to a fresh page in my notebook. This isn't just about punishing Sarah. It's about preserving Tommy's legacy. Tommy stirred in his sleep, murmuring something about the North Tower needs more guards. Linda wiped her eyes. He's been talking about this castle in his sleep for weeks. I thought it was just the medication making him fixated. It wasn't fixation. It was purpose. I stood up and walked to Tommy's art desk, where he kept his sketches and plans. Look at this. I spread out 3 sheets of construction paper covered in Tommy's careful drawings. Floor plans for each level of the castle, complete with labeled rooms and detailed notes in his 8-year-old handwriting. Great hall for feasts and important meetings. Dungeon, but not scary, just for storing treasure. Princess Tower, but also for brave knights if they want. My God, Linda breathed. How long has he been planning this? Since Dr. Martinez switched him to palliative care. He started these drawings that same week. I pointed to the date in the corner of each page, September 15th, 6 weeks ago. He knew he was running out of time, Linda. This castle was his way of building something that would last. Linda's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and frowned. It's from Jennifer Morrison. She's asking why Sarah missed the carpool for Sunday soccer practice. I forgot I was supposed to drive today. Good. Let her miss it. Sarah needs to understand that her actions have consequences. I sat back down, leaning forward intently. But missing soccer practice is nothing compared to what comes next. What do you mean? I smiled, and I could feel how cold it looked. Tomorrow is Monday. Sarah's classmates are going to learn exactly what kind of person she really is. Linda's face went pale. Lisa, what are you planning? You can't involve her school in this. Can't I? I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery, scrolling to the pictures I'd taken of Tommy's castle sketches. Sarah's English class is doing presentations on personal heroes next week. I checked the assignment details on the parent portal. Students can nominate family members, and guest speakers are welcome. The realization dawned in Linda's eyes. You wouldn't. I absolutely would. And I will. I swiped to another photo, Tommy's face lighting up as he placed the final tower piece last Tuesday, 2 days before Sarah destroyed everything. I'm going to tell them all about Tommy. About his creativity, his determination, his grace in the face of something no 8-year-old should have to endure. Linda shifted uncomfortably. That's actually beautiful, Lisa. I don't see how that punishes. I'm going to tell them about the castle. Every detail. How he planned it for weeks, how his hands shook from medication but he kept building anyway, how he dreamed of adding a dragon but ran out of time. My voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And then I'm going to tell them exactly who destroyed it, and why. Lisa, no. She's 13. Her classmates will. Will what? Judge her? Good. They should. I stood up and walked to Tommy's window, looking out at the Morrison family's perfectly manicured lawn. Do you know what Sarah told Melissa Rodriguez at lunch last Friday? Linda shook her head. She complained about how gross it was living with Tommy. How he smells like medicine and throws up too much. How embarrassing it is when her friends come over. I turned back to face my sister. Melissa's mom called me, Linda. She was concerned about how Sarah was handling things. That's when I realized this isn't new behavior. Linda's hands trembled as she clutched her phone. She's struggling too. Losing a sibling. She's not losing a sibling. She threw him away. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Tommy has bent over backwards trying to maintain their relationship. He saved his Halloween candy for her. He asked me to buy her Christmas present early, in case he's not here to give it to her himself. Tommy stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Aunt Lisa? Mom? Why are you arguing? Linda immediately moved to his bedside, her voice artificially bright. We're not arguing, sweetheart. Just discussing some grown-up things. About Sarah? Tommy's voice was clearer than it had been all day. I heard her name. I exchanged a look with Linda, then sat on the edge of Tommy's bed. We're talking about what happened today, buddy. About your castle. Tommy nodded slowly. Are you going to punish her? What do you think should happen? I asked gently. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling where we'd hung glow-in-the-dark stars last month when he'd become too weak to go outside at night. I think she should have to tell people what she did, he said finally. Not because I want her to get in trouble, but because maybe if she has to say it out loud, she'll understand. Linda leaned forward. Understand what, honey? That I'm still her brother. Even if I'm dying, I'm still her brother, and brothers are supposed to matter. A tear rolled down his cheek. I don't want to die knowing she hates me. The words broke something in Linda's chest. I could see it happen, the exact moment my sister's protective instincts shifted from Sarah to Tommy, where they should have been all along. She doesn't hate you, Linda whispered, but even she didn't sound convinced. Yes, she does. And now everyone's going to know. Tommy looked directly at me. Aunt Lisa, when you tell people about my castle, will you also tell them that I love her anyway? I had to look away, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. That's when I knew my plan was going to be even more devastating than I'd imagined. The next morning, Linda discovered Sarah's true nature ran deeper than we'd realized. I arrived at the house at 6:30 a.m. with coffee and Tommy's breakfast, vanilla Greek yogurt mixed with protein powder, the only thing he could keep down lately. Linda met me at the door, her face drawn and exhausted. She's gone, Linda said without preamble. What do you mean, gone? Sarah. She snuck out sometime after midnight. Left a note saying she was staying at Madison's house until we stopped being crazy. Linda handed me a piece of notebook paper torn from Sarah's agenda. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, not the rushed scrawl of a panicked teenager. Asterisk Mom, I'm not going to sit around and watch you and Aunt Lisa be mean to me because Tommy's sick. Madison's mom said I can stay as long as I need to. I'll come back when you remember you have 2 kids, not just one. Sarah asterisk. Madison Reeves? I asked, though I already knew. The Reeves family lived in Willowbrook Estates, the upscale neighborhood where Linda had always wanted to buy a house. Madison's mother, Patricia, had a reputation for enabling teenage drama. I called Patricia at 6 a.m. She said Sarah showed up crying, claiming we were abusing her because of jealousy over Tommy's attention. Linda's voice cracked. She bought every word. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What exactly did Sarah tell her? That we're forcing her to rebuild Tommy's Lego castle as punishment for an accident. That you threatened to embarrass her at school. That we're neglecting her emotional needs during this difficult time. Linda made air quotes around the last words, her bitterness evident. Clever, I admitted grudgingly. She's reframing herself as the victim. We walked upstairs to check on Tommy. He was awake, staring at the organized bags of Lego pieces I'd left on his desk. Sarah's not here, he said without looking at us. I heard her leave. She took her good backpack and her phone charger. How did you? I don't sleep much anymore, Tommy said matter-of-factly. The pain meds make me dizzy, but they don't really help me sleep. I heard her talking to someone on the phone around 11:30. She said she had an escape plan. Linda sank into the bedside chair. Tommy, I'm so sorry. I should have handled this better. Mom, can I ask you something? Tommy's voice was gentle but serious. If I wasn't sick, and I destroyed something really important to Sarah, what would you do to me? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Linda's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. I would make you apologize. And replace whatever you broke. And you'd lose privileges until you understood why it was wrong. So why is Sarah different? I watched my sister grapple with the uncomfortable truth. Sarah had always been different, the golden child, the achiever, the one who would carry on the family name and give Linda grandchildren. Tommy's illness had only intensified that dynamic, with Linda desperately trying to preserve Sarah's normal childhood while her son was dying. She's not different, Linda said finally. You're right. She's not different. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, this is Patricia Reeves. Linda has my number. I think we need to have a conversation about what's really going on in your family. Sarah is very upset, asterisk. I showed the message to Linda, whose face flushed with anger. The audacity, she whispered. Patricia Reeves is going to lecture me about family dynamics while harboring my daughter? Let her, I said calmly. This actually works better for what I have planned. Tommy turned to look at me, his 2 wise eyes curious. What do you mean, Aunt Lisa? I smiled and pulled out my laptop. I mean, Sarah just made a critical error. She involved outsiders, which means our family business is now public business. I opened a new browser window and navigated to the parent portal for Riverside Middle School. And once it's public, I can be as public as I want in response. Linda watched me type, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding to horror. Lisa, what are you doing? I'm scheduling that guest speaker slot for Sarah's English class, I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Mrs. Patterson replied to my email this morning. She's very excited to hear Tommy's story. Apparently, the whole 7th grade is doing a unit on courage and resilience. The irony was perfect. I finished typing my email to Mrs. Patterson and hit send. The school's automatic reply confirmed receipt. Guest speaker request for Sarah Morrison's 7th period English class scheduled for Thursday, October 12th, 2:15 p.m. 3 days. I had 3 days to prepare Tommy's story. Linda, I said, closing the laptop. I need you to call Patricia Reeves back. Tell her we'll meet at neutral ground. How about Brewster's Cafe at noon today? Why would I? Because Sarah thinks she's found sanctuary with the Reeves family. She's probably spinning elaborate tales about our abuse right now. Patricia is going to want to play peacemaker, maybe even threaten to call CPS if we don't back down. Tommy shifted in his bed, wincing as he tried to sit up straighter. Aunt Lisa, are you going to get in trouble? Not the kind that matters, buddy. I helped adjust his pillows. But Sarah is about to learn that actions have consequences, even when you're hiding behind someone else's mother. My phone rang. Linda's contact photo flashed on the screen. It was Patricia Reeves calling from Linda's phone. Answer it, I told Linda. Speaker phone. Linda accepted the call with trembling fingers. Patricia's voice filled the room, dripping with manufactured concern. Linda, honey, I'm calling because I'm deeply worried about what Sarah has told me. She's in absolute hysterics about the situation at home. What exactly did she tell you, Patricia? Linda's voice was steadier than I'd expected. Well, she said you and Tommy's aunt are forcing her to rebuild some Lego project as punishment for an accident. She's terrified about some kind of public humiliation at school. The poor child barely slept. I leaned toward the phone. Patricia, this is Lisa. What did Sarah tell you about the Lego project specifically? That she accidentally knocked over her brother's castle and now you're making her rebuild it brick by brick while you video her. That sounds like psychological torture to me. Tommy made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. Accidentally, he whispered. Patricia, I continued, did Sarah mention what her brother has been working on for the past 3 weeks? Or why this particular project was important to him? A pause. She said it was just a hobby. Something to keep him occupied while he recovers. The word recovers hit the room like a slap. I saw Linda's face go white. Mrs. Reeves, Tommy spoke up, his voice carrying clearly across the phone, I'm not recovering. I'm dying. The doctor said maybe a week. That castle was the last thing I wanted to build. Silence stretched across the line. When Patricia finally spoke, her voice had lost its confident edge. Tommy? Oh, sweetheart, Sarah said you were sick, but she didn't say. She didn't say because she doesn't want it to be true, Tommy continued with devastating honesty. But I am dying, Mrs. Reeves. And my sister looked me in the eyes and told me my castle was stupid before she smashed it. That wasn't an accident. Tommy, surely you misunderstood. I have cancer, not brain damage. Tommy's words cut through Patricia's patronizing tone like a blade. I know what I saw. I know what she said. And I know she ran away because she doesn't want to face what she did. Another long pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, Patricia covering the phone, probably having a heated conversation with her husband. When she came back on the line, her tone had completely changed. Linda, I think maybe we all need to have a conversation. Including Sarah. She may have misrepresented some details. You think? Linda's voice was razor sharp now. Patricia, my daughter manipulated you into harboring her after she destroyed her dying brother's final wish. She lied to you, to me, and to herself. And tomorrow morning, she's going to face the consequences. What happens tomorrow? I smiled coldly at the phone. Tomorrow, I visit Sarah's school to tell them about her brother's courage, his creativity, and his grace in the face of death. And I explain exactly who chose to destroy his masterpiece. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Patricia Reeves was finally understanding the magnitude of Sarah's manipulation. We'll be home by 2 o'clock, Patricia said quietly. Sarah will apologize. No, I said firmly. Sarah will face the truth. There's a difference. After Patricia hung up, Tommy looked at me with those ancient eyes. Aunt Lisa? When you tell my story at school, will you tell them about the dragon? Every detail, Tommy. Every single detail. That afternoon, while we waited for Sarah's inevitable return, Tommy did something that changed everything. He asked me to help him write letters. I want to write to my classmates, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. All the kids who sent me get well cards. I want to thank them before. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I set up his laptop on the adjustable bed table, angling it so he could type without straining his arms. His fingers moved slowly across the keyboard, pausing frequently to rest, but his words were clear and purposeful. Dear Mrs. Henderson's third grade class. Asterisk, thank you for all the cards you made me. The one with the rainbow was my favorite because you used real glitter. I wanted to tell you that I'm not going to get better, but that's okay because I got to build something really cool while I was sick. Asterisk. As Tommy typed, I read over his shoulder, and my heart broke a little more with each sentence. He was writing about Greystone Keep, describing every tower, every hidden passage, every creative detail that had consumed his final weeks. Asterisk, the dragon lair was going to be my favorite part. I designed it so the dragon could be good or bad, depending on what story you wanted to tell. Dragons shouldn't always have to be scary. Asterisk. Linda found us like this an hour later, Tommy exhausted against his pillows while I printed out his letters. She read the first page silently, tears streaming down her face. He's written 12 letters, I told her quietly. His teachers, his classmates, even some kids from the hospital. He wants everyone to know about the castle. Lisa, Linda's voice was strained. Patricia called again. Sarah's locked herself in Madison's bedroom and won't come out. She's saying we can't make her come home. I looked at Tommy, who had drifted into one of his medication-induced naps, then back at my sister. Actually, we can. Sarah's 13, not 18. If Patricia refuses to return her, we can call the police for custodial interference. I folded Tommy's letters carefully into individual envelopes. But I have a better idea. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. Tommy, I said softly. Can you wake up for just a minute? I want to record something. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused but alert. What kind of recording? I want you to tell Sarah directly how her actions made you feel. In your own words. So there's no confusion about what really happened. Tommy nodded slowly and struggled to sit up straighter. Linda helped adjust his pillows while I positioned the phone. Hi Sarah, Tommy began, looking directly into the camera. His voice was weak but steady. I know you're hiding at Madison's house, and I know you told Mrs. Reeves that what happened was an accident. But we both know that's not true. He paused to catch his breath, and I could see the effort it took for him to continue. I'm making this video because I want you to hear this from me, not from Mom or Aunt Lisa. When you destroyed my castle, you didn't just break Legos. You broke the last thing I was going to finish before I die. Linda gasped softly behind me, but Tommy kept going. I forgive you, Sarah, because you're my sister and I love you. But forgiving you doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It happened. And tomorrow, when Aunt Lisa tells my story at your school, everyone is going to know what kind of person you chose to be in my final days. He looked away from the camera for a moment, gathering strength. You can stay at Madison's house if you want. But you can't hide from the truth forever. And the truth is that when your brother needed you most, you chose to hurt him instead. Tommy's eyes found the camera again, and despite his weakness, his gaze was steady and sure. I hope someday you'll understand what you did. I hope someday you'll be sorry. The recording ended, and the room fell silent except for Tommy's labored breathing. I had everything I needed now. I sent the video to Patricia Reeves at exactly 4:17 p.m. Her response came back in less than 3 minutes, asterisk, oh my god. I had no idea. We're bringing Sarah home immediately, asterisk. But Sarah had other plans. At 4:45 p.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, Madison Reeves' voice came through, high-pitched and nervous. Ms. Peterson? This is Madison, Sarah's friend? Sarah took my mom's car keys and left. She said she's not coming back until after Thursday. My blood went cold. Madison, how long ago did she leave? Like, 20 minutes? Mom's freaking out because Sarah doesn't even have a license. She just said something about going somewhere you'd never think to look for her. I was already reaching for my own keys when Linda grabbed my arm. Lisa, where could she go? She doesn't know anyone outside of. Linda's face went pale. Oh no. You don't think she'd go to the hospital? I finished. She knows Tommy's doctors. She knows the layout. And she knows it's the one place we'd never expect her to cause a scene. We called Dr. Martinez's office immediately. His receptionist, Janet, confirmed our worst fears. Yes, Sarah Morrison arrived about 10 minutes ago. She told security she was here for Tommy's family meeting and needed to speak with Dr. Martinez urgently. She seemed very upset, so we allowed her into the consultation room. Janet, there is no family meeting scheduled, Linda said, her voice tight with panic. Sarah ran away from home. Can you get Dr. Martinez on the line? While Linda handled the hospital call, I was already calculating drive times. Riverside General was 23 minutes from the Reeves house. Sarah had a 20-minute head start, but she was driving Patricia's oversized BMW SUV, a car she'd never operated before, while emotionally distraught. The potential for disaster was enormous. Tommy stirred on his bed, somehow sensing the crisis. What's happening? Where's Sarah? She's at the hospital, buddy. She's confused about some things. I tried to keep my voice calm, but Tommy had developed an uncanny ability to read adult emotions. She went to see Dr. Martinez, didn't she? She's going to ask him to lie about me dying. The accuracy of Tommy's prediction hit like a physical blow. Of course that's what Sarah was doing. She'd spent months living in Linda's carefully constructed fantasy where Tommy was just sick and would eventually get better. Faced with the video evidence of Tommy's approaching death, she'd gone straight to the medical authority to demand a different truth. Linda finished her call and turned to us with barely controlled panic. Dr. Martinez is in surgery, but Janet said Sarah is in consultation room 3, crying and demanding to see Tommy's real medical records. She's telling anyone who will listen that we're lying to her about his condition. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Reeves, asterisk, I'm so sorry. Calling police now to report stolen vehicle. Sarah is obviously having a breakdown, asterisk. We need to get to the hospital, I told Linda. Now. I can't leave Tommy. Yes, you can. Tommy's voice cut through our argument with startling firmness. Mom, Sarah's going to make everything worse if you don't stop her. Mrs. Chen can sit with me for an hour. As if summoned by Tommy's words, our neighbor appeared at the bedroom doorway. Mrs. Chen had been quietly helping with meals and errands for the past month, and she had a key for emergencies. I heard raised voices, she said simply. Tommy called me on his phone and explained the situation. Go. I'll stay with him. During the frantic drive to Riverside General, Linda's phone rang continuously. Patricia Reeves calling with updates on police response. Madison texting apologies and crying face emojis. The hospital's patient services coordinator trying to understand why a 13-year-old was demanding access to confidential medical records. But it was the call from Janet at 5:23 p.m. that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. Linda, you need to know, Sarah found Dr. Martinez's nurse, Rebecca, in the hallway. She's following Rebecca around, sobbing and asking her to explain why everyone is lying about Tommy's prognosis. Rebecca doesn't know how to handle this situation. We're 2 minutes away, Linda said, her voice hollow with exhaustion. When we arrived at the hospital, we found Sarah in the pediatric oncology waiting room, surrounded by other families dealing with their own medical crises. She was sitting in the corner chair, the same chair where Linda had received Tommy's initial diagnosis 4 months ago, clutching a tissue box and staring at a pamphlet titled, Helping Children Understand Terminal Illness. The irony would have been funny if the situation weren't so devastating. Sarah looked up when she saw us approach, and her face crumpled with fresh tears. The pamphlet says Tommy really is dying, she whispered. Rebecca gave it to me because she thought I didn't understand. But I did understand. I just didn't want to. The pamphlet trembled in Sarah's hands as she looked between Linda and me, her face streaked with mascara and snot. Around us, other families in the pediatric oncology waiting room tried to pretend they weren't listening to our family drama unfold in real time. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, Linda's voice was deadly quiet. You stole Patricia Reeves' car. You drove without a license. You lied to hospital staff and disrupted an entire medical unit because you couldn't handle the truth. I wanted Dr. Martinez to tell me you were lying. Sarah's voice cracked with desperation. I thought maybe the tests were wrong, or maybe there was some treatment you weren't telling me about, or maybe you could manipulate a pediatric oncologist the same way you manipulated Patricia Reeves? I sat down across from her, noting how she instinctively shrank back. How did that work out for you? Sarah's face flushed red. Rebecca was nice to me. She explained everything. About the tumors and the medications and why Tommy needs oxygen now. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. She said he probably has less than a week. The clinical reality hung between us like a death sentence. Less than a week. Even I hadn't realized how little time remained. Rebecca also told me something else, Sarah continued, her eyes fixed on the pamphlet in her lap. She said Tommy's been asking about me. He keeps wondering if I'll visit him here when he gets too sick to stay at home. Linda sank into the chair beside me. What did you tell her? I told her I couldn't. That I was too scared. Sarah finally looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her 13-year-old eyes, genuine remorse mixed with terror. But that was before I knew about the castle being so important. Rebecca showed me the pictures. What pictures? I asked, though I was already afraid of the answer. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Tommy sent them to Rebecca last week. He wanted to show someone at the hospital what he was working on. She turned the screen toward us, and I felt my breath catch. There were dozens of photos, Tommy's face bright with pride as he held up individual castle pieces, close-up shots of intricate details I hadn't noticed, pictures of his sketches with excited annotations in his careful handwriting. Look at this one, Sarah whispered, swiping to a video file. He recorded a whole tour. Tommy's voice filled the waiting room, weak but animated. This is the main courtyard where the knights would practice. And see this little window? That's where the princess would watch, but she's also a knight herself because in my castle, anyone can be anything they want. Other families in the waiting room had stopped pretending not to listen. An elderly man with a bald woman, probably his wife undergoing treatment, leaned closer to hear Tommy's architectural explanations. 2 teenagers with a smaller boy between them went completely silent. Turn it off, Linda whispered, but I shook my head. Let them hear it. Let everyone hear what Sarah destroyed. The video continued for 3 more minutes, Tommy's excitement infectious as he described secret passages and explained his creative decisions. When it ended, the waiting room was completely silent. He spent 47 hours building it, Sarah said quietly. Rebecca timed it based on the photo timestamps. 47 hours over 3 weeks, even when the chemotherapy made him too dizzy to sit up straight. I felt something cold settle in my chest. How do you know about the chemotherapy making him dizzy? Sarah's face crumpled again. Because I watched him. Every day. I saw him drop pieces because his hands were shaking, and I saw him have to lie down when the room started spinning. I saw everything, and I never helped him. The admission hung in the air like a confession. And then I destroyed it anyway, she whispered. Even knowing how hard it was for him. The elderly man with the bald wife stood up and walked over to us. His face was carved with a particular kind of grief that comes from watching someone you love fight cancer. Excuse me, he said quietly, his voice carrying a slight tremor. I couldn't help but overhear. My wife Margaret here is on her 3rd round of treatment, and she's been working on a quilt. Same kind of focus your boy had with his castle. Margaret smiled weakly from her wheelchair, her hands folded over a partially completed blanket covered in intricate star patterns. If someone destroyed my quilt, she said, looking directly at Sarah, especially someone in my own family, I don't think I could forgive that. Not because of the time it took, but because of what it means when you're fighting for every day. Sarah's face went white. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. The 2 teenagers had approached now, the older one speaking with quiet authority. I'm Jake, and this is my brother Marcus. He's got leukemia, been in treatment for 8 months. Marcus, probably around 10 years old, stepped closer to Sarah with the serious expression that sick children develop too early. My sister Emma destroyed my Pokemon card collection last month, Marcus said matter-of-factly. But that was because she was mad about me getting more attention. When I told her I might die and those cards were important to me, she spent her birthday money replacing every single one. Sarah stared at Marcus, and I could see her mind working, comparing his sister's redemption to her own actions. How? How did she know which cards to replace? Sarah asked hesitantly. She paid attention. She asked questions. She spent 3 weeks going to different card shops because some of them were rare. Marcus tilted his head, studying Sarah with curious eyes. Why didn't you just help your brother build it instead of breaking it? The question, asked with such innocent directness from another sick child, hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her phone slipped from her hands, clattering onto the hospital linoleum. I was jealous, she whispered, the words coming out like a confession in church. Everyone kept talking about how amazing his castle was, and how creative he was, and how brave. Nobody ever said I was brave for having to watch my brother die. Linda started to reach for Sarah, but I held up a hand to stop her. This was Sarah's moment of truth, and it needed to happen without rescue. But you weren't watching him die, I said coldly. You were at soccer practice and honor roll ceremonies and sleepovers. You were avoiding him dying. Because it's too hard. Sarah's voice cracked with genuine anguish. Do you know what it's like to see your little brother get skinnier every day? To hear him throw up at 3 a.m. and know there's nothing you can do? To have people at school ask if he's going to die and not know what to say? Margaret wheeled her chair closer to Sarah. Honey, do you know what's harder than watching someone you love die? Sarah shook her head, tears streaming freely now. Knowing you wasted the time you had left with them because you were too scared to face the truth. The waiting room had become completely silent. Even the reception desk staff had stopped their typing to listen. Sarah looked around at all these strangers, cancer families who understood her situation better than anyone in her regular life, and something fundamental shifted in her expression. I can't undo what I did, she said quietly. Tommy's castle is gone, and he's going to die knowing I destroyed the most important thing he ever made. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone and opening my photo gallery, that's not entirely true. I showed Sarah the photos I'd taken of every single Lego piece, sorted and catalogued in labeled bags. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through image after image of organized components, gray castle walls, brown wooden doors, tiny transparent pieces that had been windows. You saved everything, she breathed. Every brick. Every specialty piece. Every tiny detail that made Tommy's castle unique. I swiped to the next folder. And I also saved these. Tommy's architectural drawings filled the screen, his careful floor plans, his notes about which rooms would serve what purposes, his sketches of the dragon expansion he'd never gotten to build. Sarah stared at the drawings, her finger tracing the screen where Tommy had written Dragon's Treasure Room, but dragons can share if they want to in his careful 8-year-old handwriting. He planned a whole story, she whispered. Look, he even drew little people to live in it. Margaret leaned over to see the phone screen. That's remarkable detail for such a young child. He had real architectural instincts. I corrected firmly. Tommy's still alive, and his castle can still be rebuilt. I looked directly at Sarah. The question is whether you're going to help rebuild it, or if you're going to spend his final days hiding from the consequences of destroying it. Sarah's hands trembled as she handed my phone back. Even if we rebuild it perfectly, it won't be the same. He'll know it's not the original. You're right, said Jake, the teenager with the brother who had leukemia. It'll be better. Sarah looked confused. How could it be better? Marcus, the 10-year-old cancer patient, spoke up with startling wisdom. Because this time, you'll know what it means to him. When Emma helped me rebuild my Pokemon collection, every card she handed me was like an apology that actually mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, Tommy asking when you're coming home. Getting tired but fighting sleep until you return *. Linda saw the message and stood immediately. We need to go. All of us. Together. Sarah hesitated, looking around at the cancer families who had become unexpected witnesses to her confession. What if Tommy doesn't want me to help? What if he's too mad at me? Then you'll have to earn forgiveness, Margaret said simply. But you can't do that from Patricia Reeves' guest bedroom. The elderly man who'd first approached us, Margaret's husband, handed Sarah a business card. I'm Robert Chen, by the way. I run a hobby shop downtown, Chen's Models and Games. Been in business 42 years. He pointed to the card. If your nephew needs any specialty Lego pieces for his dragon expansion, you bring me those drawings and I'll find them. No charge. Sarah stared at the card. Why would you help me? I'm the one who destroyed it. Because destruction is easy, sweetheart. Building something beautiful takes courage. Robert helped Margaret back into her wheelchair. And from what I heard in that video, your brother has plenty of courage. Question is whether you're brave enough to match it. As we walked toward the hospital exit, Sarah stopped suddenly. Wait. Aunt Lisa, what about Thursday? The presentation at school? I smiled, and for the first time in days, it wasn't cold. That depends entirely on what happens between now and then. Sarah's face went pale. What do you mean? I mean you have 72 hours to show Tommy, and everyone else, who you really choose to be. I held up Tommy's architectural drawings. Thursday afternoon, I'm going to tell your English class about your brother's castle. But the ending of that story hasn't been written yet. Sarah was quiet during the entire drive home, clutching Robert Chen's business card and staring out the window at the suburban neighborhoods we passed. When we pulled into our driveway, she finally spoke. Aunt Lisa? When we rebuild the castle, can we add the dragon lair exactly the way Tommy drew it? That's not up to me, Sarah. That's between you and your brother. But as we walked toward the house where Tommy was waiting, I allowed myself the smallest flicker of hope. Maybe Thursday's presentation would have a different ending after all. We found Tommy exactly where Mrs. Chen had left him, propped up in his hospital bed, oxygen cannula in place, staring at the organized bags of Lego pieces on his desk. But something was different. His breathing seemed more labored, and there was a grayish tint to his skin that hadn't been there when we left. How long has he been like this? Linda asked Mrs. Chen quietly. About 20 minutes ago, he started having trouble catching his breath. I called his hospice nurse, Rachel. She's on her way. Mrs. Chen gathered her purse, her expression grave. He's been asking for Sarah every few minutes. He knows she came back. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, taking in Tommy's deteriorated condition. This was the first time she'd really looked at him, not glanced, not avoided, but actually seen what 8 months of aggressive cancer treatment had done to her little brother. Tommy? Her voice came out as barely a whisper. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then locking onto Sarah's face. Sarah. You came home. I'm sorry I left. She took a tentative step into the room. I was scared and stupid, Anne. It's okay. Tommy's voice was weaker than it had been that morning. Aunt Lisa showed me the pictures of all my castle pieces. You saved everything. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I didn't save anything. Aunt Lisa did. I destroyed it all. But now we can rebuild it together, Tommy said with effort. If you want to. I know you think Legos are boring. No, Tommy. I never thought they were boring. I thought. Sarah moved closer to his bed, her hands twisting nervously. I thought everyone loved your castle more than they loved me. The honesty of the admission hung in the room like a confession. Tommy studied his sister's face with those ancient eyes that cancer had given him. Mom loves you more, he said matter-of-factly. She always has. That's why she goes to all your games and ceremonies. She wants to make sure you have everything perfect before I die, and you're an only child. Linda gasped from the doorway. Tommy, that's not. Mom, it's true. Tommy's gaze never left Sarah's face. But I never minded because Sarah's going to do amazing things. She's smart and pretty and good at everything. I was just happy to be her little brother. Sarah sank into the chair beside Tommy's bed, tears streaming down her face. You are amazing, Tommy. Your castle was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, and I destroyed it because I was jealous of a dying 8-year-old. How horrible does that make me? Pretty horrible, Tommy agreed, and despite everything, a small smile played at his lips. But maybe we can fix horrible. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, the hospice nurse, *ETA 10 minutes. How are his pain levels, *? I showed the message to Linda, who immediately moved to Tommy's bedside. Sweetheart, are you hurting? Everything hurts, he admitted. But I want to start rebuilding before the medicine makes me too sleepy. Sarah, will you hand me that bag of gray corner pieces? Sarah looked at the labeled bag he'd indicated, then back at his face. Tommy, maybe you should rest first. The castle can wait. No, it can't. Tommy's voice carried new urgency. Rachel's coming, which means I'm getting worse faster than expected. If we're going to do this together, it has to be now. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Tommy was right, hospice nurses didn't make unscheduled visits unless there had been significant decline. We were running out of time faster than anyone had anticipated. Okay, Sarah said, her voice steadying with new resolve. But I don't know where anything goes. You'll have to teach me. Tommy's smile was radiant despite his exhaustion. First lesson, corner pieces are the most important. They hold everything else together. As Sarah carefully opened the bag of gray Legos, I realized that Thursday's school presentation had just become infinitely more complicated. Time was running out, and our ending was still unwritten. Rachel arrived at 11:43 p.m. to find all three of us still huddled around Tommy's bed, surrounded by partially reconstructed castle walls. Tommy had managed to direct the rebuilding of the main gatehouse before his energy crashed completely, but his breathing had become increasingly shallow over the past hour. His oxygen saturation is dropping, Rachel said quietly after checking his vitals. We need to increase his flow rate and start him on additional comfort medications. Sarah's hand stilled on the Lego piece she'd been holding, a tiny arched doorway that Tommy had insisted went exactly 3 studs from the left corner. She watched Rachel adjust Tommy's oxygen settings with a kind of clinical efficiency that meant things were accelerating. How long? Linda whispered. Hours, maybe a day or 2 if we're lucky. Rachel's voice was gentle but honest. His body is shutting down faster than we anticipated. The fluid buildup around his lungs is making it harder for him to breathe. Tommy stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Did we finish the gatehouse? We did, buddy, I said, helping him see the reconstructed section. Sarah figured out where the flag pieces go all by herself. He smiled weakly at his sister. You're better at this than you thought. Sarah's phone buzzed with notifications, dozens of missed calls and texts that had accumulated while we'd been building. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. What is it? Linda asked. Madison posted about tonight on Instagram. About me stealing her mom's car and going to the hospital. Sarah scrolled through the messages, her expression growing increasingly distressed. Everyone at school knows something happened. There are like 50 comments asking if Tommy died. My jaw clenched. This was exactly the kind of social media drama that would complicate Thursday's presentation. If Sarah's classmates already thought Tommy had passed away, my planned revelation about the destroyed castle would lose its impact. What did Madison say exactly? I asked. Sarah held up her phone, showing us an Instagram story with a photo of Patricia Reeve's empty driveway. The caption read, Sarah had a total breakdown and stole my mom's BMW to go see her brother at the hospital. Praying everything's okay, folded hands, broken heart, #family emergency *. 73 people have seen it, Sarah said miserably. And Katie Brennan shared it to her story too. By tomorrow morning, everyone at Riverside Middle is going to know. Tommy coughed, a wet sound that made Rachel immediately check his positioning. Sarah, does it matter what they know? Of course it matters. They're going to think you love me enough to steal a car when you thought I was dying. Tommy's voice was barely audible, but his words cut through Sarah's panic with startling clarity. That doesn't sound horrible to me. Rachel finished adjusting Tommy's pillows and caught my eye. She gestured toward the hallway, and I followed her out of earshot. Lisa, you need to know, Tommy's going to lose consciousness soon, probably within the next 12 hours. Once that happens, he likely won't wake up again. She glanced back toward the room where Sarah was showing Tommy how she'd organized the remaining Lego pieces by color and size. Whatever your family needs to say to each other, it needs to happen tonight. I nodded, my throat tight. The school presentation is supposed to be Thursday afternoon. I was planning to cancel it, Rachel said firmly. Or postpone it indefinitely. Tommy won't be here Thursday, and Sarah's going to need time to process her grief before facing public scrutiny. But as I looked back into Tommy's room, watching Sarah carefully place each Lego brick exactly where her dying brother directed, I realized Rachel was wrong. Thursday's presentation was more important now than ever. because the story I was going to tell had just found its perfect ending. Tommy passed away at 6:17 a.m. on Thursday morning, October 12, 2023. He slipped away peacefully while Sarah held his hand, surrounded by the carefully reconstructed walls of Greystone Keep. We had worked through the night, and he had managed to see his castle complete one final time, dragon lair and all, before closing his eyes for the last time. At 2:15 p.m. that same afternoon, I stood before Sarah's 7th grade English class as planned. The room was silent. Word had already spread through Riverside Middle School about Tommy's passing. Sarah sat in the front row, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. She had insisted on being there, despite Linda's protests and my own reservations. Today I was supposed to tell you about my nephew Tommy Morrison and his incredible castle, I began, my voice steady despite the grief lodged in my throat. Tommy died this morning, but his story, the real story, still needs to be told. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation, Tommy's architectural drawings, scanned and enlarged so every careful detail was visible. His handwriting spelling out Dragon's Treasure Room, but dragons can share if they want to. Tommy spent the last 3 weeks of his life building something extraordinary. Not just a Lego castle, but a masterpiece of imagination and determination. He called it Greystone Keep. I advanced to the next slide, Tommy's face bright with pride as he placed the final tower piece. This photo was taken last Tuesday, 2 days before Tommy's castle was deliberately destroyed. A murmur rippled through the classroom. Mrs. Patterson shot me a questioning look, but I continued. The person who destroyed Tommy's castle did so out of jealousy and spite. She looked an 8-year-old cancer patient in the eyes and told him his dying wish was stupid before smashing it to pieces. I clicked to the next slide, the aftermath, Lego pieces scattered like confetti across Tommy's bedroom floor. That person was your classmate, Sarah Morrison. Tommy's own sister. Sarah didn't flinch. We had practiced this moment, planned it together during Tommy's final hours. She understood that this was bigger than her reputation or her social standing. But that's not the end of Sarah's story, I continued, advancing to a new photo, Sarah and Tommy working side by side at 3 a.m., carefully rebuilding the castle's main tower. Because sometimes, the worst thing you've ever done becomes the catalyst for becoming who you're truly meant to be. I showed them picture after picture from our all-night reconstruction project. Sarah's face evolving from reluctant participation to genuine engagement to something approaching joy as she helped Tommy place each piece exactly where it belonged. Sarah Morrison destroyed her dying brother's final wish, I said, looking directly at her. And then she spent the last night of his life making sure he saw it completed. She learned what true courage looks like, not the absence of fear, but doing what's right despite being terrified. The final slide was a video Tommy had recorded at 5:43 a.m., just hours before his death. This is Sarah, and she helped me finish Greystone Keep. She's the best big sister in the world, and I want everyone to know that when I needed her most, she was brave enough to be there. The classroom was completely silent. Several students were crying openly. Sarah stood up slowly, facing her classmates with the same quiet dignity she had shown while holding Tommy's hand as he died. I did destroy his castle, she said, her voice clear and strong. I was horrible and selfish and cruel. But Tommy taught me that who you choose to be in someone's final moments matters more than all the mistakes that came before. She looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes directly. My brother died knowing I loved him. That's the only reputation that matters to me now.